Hello and welcome to Ask Lovecraft After Dark. I am your host, Lehman Kessler of the web series Ask Lovecraft. Tonight, we're going to be joined by actor and writer Cody Goodfellow. Cody Goodfellow is going to join us as soon as he is back from walking his dog. As someone who has a dog, I can appreciate that sometimes you simply have to follow the call of nature, and dogs rarely abide by any man's schedule. But I wanted to start things off, as I often do, by talking about Cody and about how I got to know him. Like with a lot of folks who are going to be on this show, I got to meet Cody doing conventions. I probably saw him from afar when I was doing the very first Necronomicon back in 2013. And yes, someone just noticed I'm wearing myself. Folks may have recognized this shirt from my shameless advertising. Was that this week or last week? Anyway, at some point I did some shameless advertising. This is a rare collector's item at this point. This is the first run of the Ask Lovecraft shirt that was being put out for a while and then got discontinued. And now we have the new shirts, which are all black and heavy metal, I guess. No, they're just black. And that's those are being put out by Arkham Bazaar. I think that's going to be our probably our main run for a while. So if you want my face on your body, you just go to Arkham Bazaar, look up Ask Lovecraft, and hey, my face will be on your body. There you go. Leah in the audience has one of those. I think you have one of these because I definitely remember seeing you at a con. I think it was Necronomicon 2015 and being like, yay. And you running up and being like, Lehman. And my wife being like, why does this woman have your face on her? That happens. That's just part of the celebrity life, is sometimes your face is going to be on the body. I need to stop saying that. But speaking of Necronomicon, I believe that is where Cody and I met professionally, if not in any real direct way. It would be later on at, I want to say in Portland at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. Either H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival or Cthulhu Con, but I think it was the film festival back in 2015. And he was going to be doing one of his Cthulhu prayer breakfasts. And this is one of the things I got to know him from was because I definitely heard about the 2015 prayer breakfast because it was very infamous. But he asked me to be at this one to put on the flesh mask and make and do a guest appearance. I want to remember what precisely we were doing. We may have done it was an exorcism. He wanted to exorcise me. That's what it was. So for a little bit of filler, the 2015 Necronomicon was met with a certain amount of controversy. One of the guests of honors, one of the guest speakers was Robert Price, who is really well known for a lot of his work in Lovecraft, doing editing. I want to say he edited some anthologies, and he's pontificated and talked a lot about Lovecraft over the decades. And he gave the big sort of keynote address to kind of launch things. And it was a contentious speech. He definitely was defending Lovecraft's legacy from what he saw as political correctness or attacks from political correctness. And it was pretty resoundingly called out by a lot of folks. And he there was a lot of sort of repercussions to it. But the immediate repercussion is that Dr. Price is one of the big, sort of hierophants and grand poobahs of the Cthulhu prayer breakfasts, which are these were based. When Cody gets here, I'll ask him more specifically about where they come from. But we're based on kind of a semi-regular gathering of Lovecraft weirdos. And now they're this kind of big hurrah. Usually they're something that folks pay a little extra for, or they're part of kind of Kickstarters or things like that. And yeah, it's just a chance to come and see folks talking about Lovecraft in this very stylized way. People wear masks and robes, and it's got a nice cultist vibe to it. There's dancing, and so and there's breakfast. There's food, which is always very important. Someone who grew up Southern Baptist, I understand the appropriate amount of food that you need to really get your religious juices flowing. And at this particular Necronomicon prayer breakfast, they assassinated Robert Price. Cody Goodfellow organized a handful of folks to show up with bubble guns, like guns that shot bubbles, and they blasted Robert Price. And then as a carry-on, when the next prayer breakfast in Portland, they were going to do an exorcism of me. That was so that's where that came from. And it was fun. It was fun getting exercised. You know, getting my hands laid on me, as it were. And then I'm pretty sure we sang a song. And I think that was when we did Baby Got Bass. I want to say. And that was there's a music video for Baby Got Bass, which Cody eventually recorded and put out. And I shared it in the Appreciation Society. And I'll probably have a link to it in the description of this video because it's a lot of fun. And he put a lot of hard work into it. And it's ridiculous, as these things should be. And what else? What now? Because I did a second one. Oh, so then it's I went out to the next HP Lovecraft Film Festival in Santa Fe. And that one I also did a prayer breakfast for. That one was a combination of doing kind of the prayer breakfast, and that's when I did my live show. Because a lot of times when I come out to these conventions, I'll get set to do a live show. My standard, like just taking questions from the audience. My usual bit for anyone who's either seen me live, or if you go to my playlist section on YouTube, you can see almost all of the live shows that I've done. And the openings are very similar, but if you stick through it, eventually, once we get to the Q&A section, those are very different, and those are a lot of fun. And if you only watch one live show, watch the one I did for George R.R. Martin, and you can hear George R.R. Martin asking me questions. Where was I? Oh, yes. So this was kind of a combination of that. And Cody and I got up and we sang some beautiful music together. I don't think we did Baby Got Bass for that. What did we do? We did, it's in the link. It's in one of those links that I shared. But that was a lot of fun. And yeah, Cody is a rambunctious guy. He is a lot of fun. He is incredibly energetic. I got a chance to see him do some live readings of his one of his stories. I've got a list of his stories so that I want to say it was Strategies Against Nature. I got a chance. Or would that have been around when maybe he was doing a reading of it before it came out. I got to hear him read from it, and it was strange and vulgar and a lot of fun, as these things tend to be. And yeah, he just, I know he's done acting. He's done commercial work for a while. He had this amazing, just giant beard, and was using that to do all sorts of delightful film work, commercial work. And he is, he's just a fascinating figure in this whole world of Lovecraftiana. And if and when he shows up, I'm sure he will have a lot more to say about it. Check out the chat to see are people disparaging Dr. Pepper over here? Come on, guys. Dr. Pepper is fantastic. I just got a whole bunch of Kraken rum, and I'm going to mix some of that with Dr. Pepper, and I'm going to call that a Greyjoy taking the black, because I'm a big old nerd. I love Dr. Pepper. I refuse to be ashamed. I refuse to be ashamed for my soda love. Dr. Pepper and Fanta were like two of the most prevalent sodas I had growing up in Nigeria. So there's a lot of memories they evoke in me. So I don't want to see anyone over in the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society disparaging that fine Dr. Pepper, unless, of course, you have diabetes, in which case, by all means, keep away from that because you will lose a foot. That's right. Welcome to Soft Drink Talk. I'm your host, Lehman Kessler. We're going to be talking about all the delightful carbonated beverages that will titillate one's fancy. That's not true. I don't think I could keep that going. I could try, but I think that would get a little disturbing, a little fast. Oh, we're apparently. Oh, here we go. Oh, so somebody's saying that it's just the fact that it's Dr. Pepper that makes it intimidating. Mr. Pepper, Mr. Pepper Esquire. You know that's where it's at. That's who can make it happen in this world. So while we're waiting for Cody, I guess now is the time. If you folks have questions, folks have comments, concerns about the show, we have had. This has been a sort of a weird little week for the program. I've been having fun, and that's always dangerous when I'm having fun. Because the episodes tend to get a little strange, a little meta. I had a lot. Actually, I'll tell you what. I actually really enjoyed the episode that went out today because it's something that allows me to be very honest with Lovecraft. This was the next episode. Its title is Next. It's not the next one coming out. It's just called Next. Because yeah, it's about who would Lovecraft's literary heir be? Who would be the next Lovecraft? And one thing you discover reading Lovecraft's actual letters and his nonfiction, his real self, is just how humble he was, how much he was creating art, and he was creating this sort of this fantastic kind of series of worlds that folks would be able to play in, but he was there's there's questionable whether how much of it's false modesty, but he's constantly kind of putting himself down, putting his art down. But he was interested in other people. He's interested in the work that they were doing. Anytime, someone like Derleth would send him a story that was just kind of a pastiche of stuff Lovecraft did, he would say, look, don't try to do what I'm doing. I'm doing what I'm doing. You need to find what you're doing. And Derleth took that somewhat to heart, but also continued writing lots of pastiches and collaborations with Lovecraft after the fact. Here we go. Someone is suggesting a live Halloween performance. Bring in a red light. And reading some horror. That could be fun as we get closer to Halloween. I got to sort of figure out the timing of it because we do only every other 2 weeks. Flashlight under the chin. If you were here for my interview with Scott Glancy last 2 weeks ago, you might remember why I don't care for flashlights under the chin. It brings up some traumatic memories for me. And if you'd missed that conversation with Cody Goodfellow, with Scott Glancy, I definitely recommend going back and checking it out because that was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was interesting interviewing Scott Glancy so soon after interviewing Ken Hite. We kind of had two game designers / experts in the world of conspiracies and weirdness on back to back. And I mean, that was a lot of fun for me. It may have been kind of super nerding out for y'all. So if it was a little much, I apologize. But this is my show, so I'm going to be a bit much. That's my prerogative. I'm allowed to just kind of self-indulge. That's why you guys are here. That's why you guys are here to see me and my face on my body being self-indulgent. And speaking of conventions, it's looking more and more likely that I'm going to be doing a convention in the spring near Cleveland. Nothing is finalized yet, but I'm hoping that that we'll be able to get that going. Where it's always a trick trying to figure out children, where to put the children when I abandon my family. So we're working on that right now. Let's see. Someone is saying Hunter S. Thompson. It never got too weird for me. Well, yes, Hunter S. Thompson. He certainly indulged himself and had a very uh, exciting life right up until the rather pointed end. If the show was on my birthday, I'd be allowed to cry if I want to. Oh, you know what? I love that song because it's got a sequel, and not a lot of songs have sequels. Like if they're not part of like a rock opera or something. But the fact that, it's my party, I can cry if I want to, and now it's Susie's turn to cry or Debbie's turn to cry, whatever the follow-up song is a direct play off of it. That always tickled me. I'm not gonna lie. I found that incredibly endearing and charming as a young child with too much time on his hand and access to a lot of random like classic rock records and a parent's turntable. Man alive, got to introduce my children to turntables, which moderately confused them. But I will say it was incredibly heartening finding like my old ratty LP of the Rankin Bass Hobbit movie that they transcribed to LP, to record and vinyl, and putting that on for my daughter and having her just insist to keep listening to Glenn Yarbrough warbling and Orson Bean being the best Bilbo Baggins of all time. If folks have not seen the Rankin Bass Hobbit, it is amazing. It is the true Hobbit, and whatever Peter Jackson tried to do, it did not hurt me too much because I knew that we would always have the Rankin Bass in our hearts. And the LP for it is indelibly etched in my brain because as a child, I listened to that thing over and over and over again. And I cannot imagine just what it did to me and how it set me up. But if I hadn't listened to it unhealthy number of times, we probably wouldn't be here today. So you can thank Rankin Bass, and you can thank whatever strange marketing decision decided to have them release the film also on LP. It's weird the things that we had on like alternative media. We had a cassette tape for the Battle for Endor movie, the sequel to the sequel to the Caravan of Courage, Great Ewok Adventure. That's also a strange thing to listen to a lot as a child. Like that's a movie that just watching alone was is going to do strange things to you. But having that on like cassette tape on car trips, and apparently I think it was my brothers listened to it a lot more. I listened to it like a time or two as a kid, but my brothers like were obsessed with this cassette. I think my parents were almost to the point of wanting to throw it into a fire. Someone said, okay, making The Hobbit a musical daring choice. How is it a daring choice? The music is already there. Like chip the glasses, crack the plates. Like that's already like Tolkien's already got that there for you, 15 birds and 5 fir trees. All you got to do is like set that to music. Bring in Glenn Yarbrough with his warbly voice to be roads go ever on. So I'm just saying it's already a musical. And that's when the dwarves did start singing in the Peter Jackson version, I got excited and hopeful that it was going to be sort of more whimsical and not trying to like be epic, what have you. And then it became epic, what have you. Funnily enough, it was at the last Necronomicon I attended in 2015 when we were channel surfing. And we stopped on one channel and thought, oh, dear Lord, what is this awful Lord of the Rings knockoff movie? Oh, this is the third Hobbit film. Oh, that was awkward. What are we talking about? Ewoks movies, the monster. Oh, yes, the monster in the first one was like the like bizarre claymation. Oh, wait, no, which monster? Because there was the weird like claymation dog, like flesh beasts that went after Ewoks. And then there was like the giant with the really bad green screen or blue screen, whatever it was back then, who, as I'm trying to remember, I'm remembering the Predator. I know that's not right. I'm remembering either the Predator or the Cyclops from Krull. Like that's kind of getting mashed up into my head for what the giant in the Caravan of Courage looked like. But yeah, no, that thing was all the bizarro monsters in that really messed me up as a kid. And I mean, in a good way, in a happy way. But yeah, that was definitely what was going on. Oh, okay. All right. Listen up. Okay, now someone is saying the musical performances in The Hobbit far outstrip The Last Unicorn. can I kick people out of a chat? I know there's not a lot of people watching, but like, how dare you? How dare you both attack the good name of America and also the beautiful singing talents of Mia Farrow and Jeff Bridges. I love Last Unicorn, guys. I mean, like, I love The Hobbit as well. I didn't mean for this episode to turn into a walk down Lehman's childhood memory and media choices, but I feel like Cody would approve. I feel like he'd be down for that. Um, but oh man, guys, The Last Unicorn, again, something I watched way too much on Warbly VHS. I did not have either a cassette tape or a vinyl for that one. So that one was pure either VHS, or did we have that on beta? No, I think it was just VHS. Our beta selection was very limited. Uh, but oh man, if you have not watched that in 20, 30 years, go back, because I feel it is aged well. Yes, it's America, singing about unicorns, singing about walking man's roads, but like, I don't know, it is so fun. And like, how often are you going to get an animated movie that's got, Christopher Lee, Alan Arkin, Jeff Bridges, Mia Farrow, Angela Lansbury? I mean, she did other movies, but and Odo, right? Rene Auberjonois himself playing the skeleton, the skull in the castle. Absolutely fantastic. And a bunch of other guys, of course, brother Theodore, who played Gollum in the Rankin Bass Hobbit and Rankin Bass Return to the King, which I suppose if we're making our way through all of this, I'm eventually going to have to touch on where there's a whip, there's a way. But it was, The Last Unicorn definitely awoken strange things inside a young Lehman, making him go down certain paths in life. Let's see. Someone had a VHS of The Last Unicorn autographed by Peter S. Beagle. That's fantastic. Of course, there's a very good chance Peter S. Beagle didn't get any money for that unless he paid for the autograph, because, oh man, all the weird fights over Peter S. Beagle's sort of legacy and like how he got screwed over by the making of those movies. Oof. Like, it's hard. Like, it's hard reading that stuff and what happened with his agent and like having to sue for control of his estate and everything. Oh, oof. That is just, that is a sad, sad tale for someone who created some truly beautiful, beautiful unicorn magic for us, who, gave us a fantasy novel that had the line, sit down, have a taco, like, there's just not enough tacos running around in fantasy novels, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's potatoes all over them, and potatoes are essentially as ahistorical as tacos would be. But people seem to accept that willy-nilly. They don't care. Fry them, mash them, boil them in a stew. All right. Okay, good. The autograph was paid for, so at least for that, Mr. Beagle got his due. And that's an interesting thing about, being now friends with so many folks in the literary world, seeing the seeing the kind of the other side of that, the business side, the professional side, all the like weird fights over legacies and who controls legacies. Like, that has been eye-opening. I mean, I knew sort of bits and pieces about Peter Spiegel and his struggles. But it wasn't until, I had friends who were authors who know the real scene, and just seeing how ugly it is. Oof, rough. All right. Okay. So someone has just brought up the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings. I respect Ralph Bakshi's innovations, the way he pushed animation, the way he strove to, make it something adult, something that not seen as just for kids. And but man alive, I just don't like it. It's really hard to watch that Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry. You know what? It's been a while. Maybe if I go back and check out Anthony Daniels' fine work, as was Anthony Daniels Legolas in that? the casting for that is bizarre because I think it's William Hurt as Aragorn, which I mean I love William Hurt. No, not William Hurt. John Hurt. Which one? The one who was Caligula. Caligula Hurt um, was Aragorn in that. Um, but it's just I don't know. I find it's just very dark and very hard to sort of like see what's happening. I mean, again, it makes things like the Nazgul really terrifying uh, to have to go along with. Um, but as for just the actual, sitting down to watch it, someone's talking about how they used recreational pharmaceuticals to watch the Bakshi adaptation, and that's probably going to be the best way. I like the Rankin and Bass. I like that goofy, bubbly style. The kind of storybook, curly, very hyper detail oriented. Large eyes, just everything about it. Yes, it does look like a strange 70s fantasy poster art, but there's something about it. What I'll tell you what it is. There's something about that design and that look that is, it's so over the top and so otherworldly, but then you'll be just going about your daily life and you will see people that look like that. I remember being on the subway in Toronto and I just saw two dudes and it looked like Thorin and glowing, just like the wrinkles, the beards, like just everything about them, like every texture of them, they seemed like hand drawn, having burst out of the films. And then the other day I took a picture of my daughter and oh, dear Lord, the way the like light caught in her curly hair and like in like the glint of her eye, she looked like a creepy Ralph Bakshi hobbit, and trying to sell me her weird cookie. So there's something about that style of those three movies, Hobbit, Last Unicorn, and Return of the King. And I don't know, it's really evocative. I'm pretty sure folks in the crowd can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the folks who worked on that, many of them would go on to also be a part of Studio Ghibli. And I think that makes sense to me because there's again that sense of texture that is really really delightful, and the sort of the fullness of the world, and it's a lot of fun. Someone just said that someone sprayed my pillow with PCP. I don't think that's the case. Maybe when I saw these individuals, something happened. But as far as I'm aware, I was able to view them of my own cognizance. Someone's also saying now Bakshi rotoscoped his crowd scenes, big battles, which does make it look something like a Xerox. And I mean, like, again, I really do appreciate the technique. I really do appreciate that he was striving to do something weird and different and cool. I wish I like looking at it more. And there's some folks who can make stuff that's like really uncomfortable to look at, and yet you're still compelled. Anyone who has seen Aeon Flux or Reign the Conqueror, that's incredibly hard to look at, like especially when anyone's like neck moves or their shoulder blades. Peter Chung has these very specific styles, and they are again, they are disturbing to look at. Oh, apparently he also worked on Fire and Ice. So sorry, start doing some Peter Chung lookup while I'm talking with y'all. Again, it's hard to look at, and yet I find them much more compelling. Peter Chung in the 90s had a great show. I want to say it was on either the WB or UPN called Phantom 2040. And it was based on the old like Phantom pulps, comics and whatnot. And but set in the distant future of 2040. And it was cool and creepy and cyberpunky, and like every time someone's like neck muscles moved, you like, oh, your stomach lurched a bit. But it was a lot of fun. There was a couple of there was that weird like playing with cyberpunk in children's cartoons back in the 90s. There was Project Geeker if anyone remembered that delightful piece, which was all weird dystopian corporate hyper future with talking dinosaurs, which I approve of. So again, I like it when people are trying new things, different things, things that are strange, things that you're like, how did this get greenlit? um, and I like a lot of the other stuff that Bakshi did. Wizards, what was Fire and Ice or Ice of Fire? I was not as into Fire and Ice. It was, I don't know. It was a little too of its time. A very, very honest to its source material, I suppose. But just a bit much. So let's see. Someone talked about, someone wanted to know if I was ever a fan of old school horror or wrestling. Uh, I'll start with wrestling. No, I was never really into wrestling. I was sort of just aware of it as a kid and sort of aware of it pop culturally. I really like Slim Jims. That's probably about as close as that came. But I do like wrestling people, and I like people I like wrestling fans and folks talking about wrestling and hearing that enthusiasm. Um, there was what was it? I was on, so my other show I do, Miskatonic Musings, we had on previous guest, Molly Hanser, and she's a big wrestling fan, and my co-host, Charles, is a big wrestling fan. And so the two of them like decided they were going to educate me on wrestling. So we did a whole episode about wrestling. We watched a really great wrestling movie, like film noir, which was awesome. And we talked about professional wrestling, and it was really, I don't know, there's something about having an earnest conversation, like not one where you're just like making fun of the other person, but like a real earnest conversation where people are talking about what they're passionate and what they love, and just listening and just being able to kind of appreciate their passion. And I find that's often the case with wrestling and all that fun stuff. One of the things that I liked a bit more before I sort of knew about his unfortunate private life was Max Landis's Wrestling is Not Wrestling. So Max Landis, filmmaker, showrunner for Dirk Gently, Holistic Detective Agency, which is a fantastic show. He did a great video all about the death and rebirth of Superman, but then he also did this thing all about wrestling. And one of his shticks is it's kind of like Drunk History. He sort of motor mouths about something and then brings in friends to recreate his motor mouthing by lip syncing. And it's fun and silly. Again, his personal life is questionable and sort of casts a shadow and a pall over all the stuff he's done. But if if, as we often have to do on this program, if you're able to put a slight, divide art and artist, he's someone who can talk very passionately, very enthusiastically about a subject and draw you in, even if you yourself are not that interested in wrestling or Superman. And Wrestling is Not Wrestling definitely falls into that category. So it's a fantastic video essay. I'm not quite sure what I would call it. Sort of part documentary with a lot of swears. And so wrestling is not something that I was ever super into, again, aside from those parameters. And as for old school horror, I mean, I'm assuming by old school horror, you're probably meaning like Dracula, Frankenstein, what have you. Um, and I didn't watch a ton of that growing up. I was sort of aware of it. I remember being when I was a little kid in second grade, going to the library, and they had like just books about the movies, like pictures from the movies, and like the making of and stuff like that. And I used to love just flipping through those and having a lot of fun with that. But um when I got into horror was really like, my teen years, and my sort of blockbuster junkiness. um, and so most of what I was watching was like cheesy 80s horror, and cheesy 90s horror stuff put out by Vidmark. Uh, I really liked the Leprechaun series. I really liked Dr. Giggles, Cemetery Man. I will say one horror movie that I grew up with and was watching at the same time that I was watching like The Hobbit and Last Unicorn was The Oblong Box, which is a really disturbing Vincent Price, Christopher Lee movie, roughly based on a Poe story. We did a review of that also on Miskatonic Musings. My co-hosts were a little put out, but they often get worried when I suggest films. But I watched the crap out of The Oblong Box as a kid, and who knows what that did to me, this like murder movie. And it was yeah. So that's how I came into horror, was again just like weird VHSs that I could find just working either going to Blockbuster first, or then when I started working at Blockbuster, I watched a lot. The Night of the Demons franchise. And then being on this horror show, being on Miskatonic Musings, that got me more into that because we just watched so much horror. That has me watching a lot of different horror. I'm watching a lot more J horror, Korean horror. We just watched Train to Busan, which is fantastic. We just watched Le Manoir, a Belgian horror movie, which is not as fantastic. And yeah, it was. Yeah, it's been interesting to sort of rediscover horror in a professional way. Oh, hello. There we go. Speaking of professional horror, we've got Cody. Thank you so much, Cody, for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
That's all right. I have been going on a tear talking about Ewoks and Ralph Bakshi, so you're good.
I'm going to walk a little bit closer to my Wi-Fi.
That's always wise.
Because
stand by your Wi-Fi.
Your thing is your feed is a little bit patchy.
Oh dear. Okay.
So how have you been?
I've been doing really well, Cody. How about you?
Terrific. Things are looking up. It's been a retro season, but it's almost over.
There we go. I've gone through and sort of given our personal history together, the various Cthulhu prayer breakfasts you've had me on, and of course our delightful collaboration with Baby Got Bass. And one thing I wanted to ask and talk with you a bit about was the prayer breakfasts, how you got involved with them, when you got involved with them, and sort of what precisely are they?
Okay, well. To take those in reverse order, the Cthulhu Prayer Breakfast is sort of a celebration of unity, usually to heal the scabs that have been ripped open by a long and contentious con.
Is that why they're held at the end?
And yes. So that people leave with a little bit of positivity, and they're less likely to have beaten each other with the program. So then they have a souvenir that they can keep. They I think started at the old Necronomicon. Daryl Schweitzer and Bob Price and sundry others were involved in putting these things together, and it's sort of I think it's a wonderful way of coming together and recognizing how ridiculous this thing that we all love is, and yet how wonderful it is that it brings such a diverse and weird crowd of people together. And I got involved because several years back at a Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, back when it was held in the springtime, Bob was laid low by allergies. I don't know if you know this, but the Willamette Valley is the I think Willamette is the Indian word for hay fever death, and he was unable to perform on the closing blessings and the prayer breakfast, and so I stepped in and sort of apprenticed him under him for a little while. And then in true apprenticeship style, I eventually stabbed him in the back at Necronomicon in Providence.
We talked about the assassination in 2015, the assassination by Bubbles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what brought that up, what that brought that about. And then, of course, where I stepped in was the next time we were all in Portland was because you assassinated him. So now you've got to obviously exercise H.P. Lovecraft himself.
Yes. And so, you manfully stepped in to provide that service. So that, it was our first prayer breakfast with a bona fide sacrifice. And it was a really neat bit that I really got into, because so much of this debate runs up against the wall of, well, yeah, but he's dead. And so, you can point to this or that in his career, or this or that tone. Oh, his tone was starting to soften as cancer was gnawing his bowels away.
Like it does.
And it's, and of course, it's all fantasy baseball, speculating on whether or not he would have, in the fullness of time, come to recognize the short-sightedness of his views and reject bigotry. But he's dead. And so the wonderful question again, if you could drag him out on the carpet, what would you ask, or what would you tell him in order to, in hopes of trying to redeem this, so that we don't feel conflicted about enjoying this stuff, And I thought we did a great job. I thought we removed the stain into perpetuity.
There we go. But with the stain gone, like, is the magic still there? The prayer breakfast still going?
Well, I mean, we are ripe for some mission creep, definitely. I think in the sermons that I do at the prayer breakfast, I try to use the framework of the Cthulhu mythos and the cult of Dagon in order to actually find a way of reaffirming a real spiritual message. I've often said that the Cthulhu mythos is pulp, and that it is a wonderful metaphor for the rationalist fear that maybe we're wrong. Maybe there is a God. He just hates us. And so to willfully accept that kind of weird cognitive dissonance, it's an odd mirror of a lot of the extremes of religion that the Cthulhu mythos drew upon. And so playing with that is a wonderful way of getting people to think about how the things that they love, the escapism, fits into and completes your life. And to try to, because you get tired of doing fire and brimstone sermons about the world and the privileged afterlife that awaits us, because you could go to a regular church for that on Sundays.
I wish. I keep telling
oh yeah.
Well, my wife's a priest, and I keep telling her she needs more sermons that start "Woe betide."
Right. Have you sent her the link to the place that has the baptismal font with a water slide yet?
One day.
Okay. Well, yeah, baby steps. But I mean, I'm a non-believer, but my girlfriends observed that she'd pay me handsomely to write a story that isn't about religion, and so, I mean, the outer extremes of belief, and how something that's completely divorced from the material world can inform and direct your life, and make you feel like you're part of a new gospel, or make you feel like you're part of a part of the mythology yourself by actively and slavishly, unthinkingly participating in it. It's a fascinating notion when you have a room full of very rational folks who pride themselves on their individual thinking, and so they relish an opportunity to throw off their critical and slouch and shamble, and so to try to turn that into something positive, and to try to get people to see that this thing does help you in life. It does help you reconcile a lot of the monstrous absurdity and order, and it does prepare you to be a little bit kinder than possibly the person next to you when the shit hits the fan.
Well, very true. Now, did you grow up religious and sort of slouch it all off, or have you discovered religiosity solely through the works of H.P. Lovecraft?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I read The Golden Bough because he said to. I was raised in a very open, let your kid find his own way, kind of a hippie household, and my mom would occasionally feel really strong spiritual stirrings, or she'd feel guilty and she'd drag us to a service, whether it was a Catholic service or a Lutheran one. She eventually ended up joining the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is a non-denominational kind of like the most benign cult you've ever seen. Okay. I went to I visited her at a convocation once in the hotel in downtown Los Angeles, the name of which will occur to me later, but it would be Telefon. And it was weird how there were thousands of people exactly like my mom. Basically, they were all counselors, guidance counselors, teachers, nurses, people who were very, very altruistic and very giving of themselves, and very hypersensitive, and wearing lots of turquoise and silver jewelry. And it was really weird how something had completely owned a whole demographic of folks, and they I'd go to see services occasionally with her, and they'd have these monks that live in an ashram up in Encinitas. Most of them surf. And they'll quote Derrida or Nietzsche or something occasionally, in amongst other stuff, in amongst kind of the blithe atheist jokes. But it's always very much kind of a salad bar, very much a rejection of the notion of what makes religion is that it's dogmatic, and here's a set of rules. No, you don't get to pick and choose your toppings, and so I think because it was the opposite of my experience is what fascinates me about people who live in or under, or who seek out very dogmatic religious views of the world.
Well,
so,
yes,
yeah, Lovecraft was the logical,
the logical conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and while Lovecraft rejected religion, as understood, sort of spiritual religion, I mean, he himself was also bound by a different kind of dogma, and kind of rigid worldview. Did you come to your writing? Absolutely. Your writing through Lovecraft, or did you come to Lovecraft through your writing? Or were they on tangential planes?
I think probably the classical point. Yeah. The same classical point that a lot of folks do, when your parents give you a copy of What's Happening to My Body, and stuff, early adolescence. I picked up The Shadow over Innsmouth and so right as I was beginning to have my little, early adolescent existential freak out. And it was a perfect metaphor for that sense that the world was so much older and larger and decentralized and meaning, or has received wisdom from your parents. And I think some of the first stories that I showed to somebody, besides, was fortunate enough to have an independent study, write alone in a room and listen to whatever music I wanted. And at the end of the month, she would look at what I was working on. And I wrote some modern Lovecraftian horror stuff that, like remedial Ramsey Campbell, when I was about 14, 15. And so, yeah, it did inform my writing going forward. And it's always been something very difficult to put behind me as an influence, whether it's something overt or whether it's just a flavor, concepts that intrude even in things that are wildly different in terms of genre.
Well, I was telling the folks I've had the absolute joy and delight of getting a chance to listen to you do some of your readings at these various conventions and whatnot. I think I got to hear you read some of Strategies Against Nature, which
right
was certainly a delight. But the project I would
Thank
most
you.
like to hear about right now, before we get into sort of what you're currently got going on, I want you to talk a bit about your collaboration with Mike Dubish.
Okay.
Tell us about
Forbidden Futures.
Tell us about
or
Meat.
Mystery Meat.
I want to hear about Meat.
Okay, yeah. Mystery Meat. Project near and dear to my fat clotted heart. Mystery Meat was a thing that I originally had come up with the concept and pitched it to publishers as what I thought was a dead solid, can't miss horror comic. Of course, there's no such thing. And pitched it to Dark Horse, and there was an 8-page story called New Meat at the time that appeared in MySpace, and it got reprinted there. The artist who did the other story is now an animation director over at Disney, and it came out wonderfully, but they weren't interested thing. And Mike and I had worked on a number of shorter projects. I met him through Comic-Con and was a huge fan of his work and a few things for me. And when he had time to work on a sequential project, which is rare because unless somebody's paying for it in advance, it's almost impossible to get somebody to draw a comic because it takes almost less time to write one, but it takes days per page to actually draw one credibly. And we approached it in real baby steps. We wrote the thing in originally in 4 8-page stories, kind of along the lines of an old EC or Warren comic, and scripts out to 12 pages to make more room for the art. And we talked to a couple of and were really discouraged by the response, but we still really believed in the project, so we did it as a Kickstarter campaign, and we produced 1,500 copies of the graphic novel, which is it's 48 pages of comic and 16 pages of Zapro news articles and some fake ads and things like that. And it did pretty well. I mean, we got rid of all of them.
That's what's important.
And it's still on Comixology. It was weird. It was weird to me because I felt like, well, I mean, of course, in the social media bubble and things like, it's really easy to feel like there's a huge need for everybody wants this. Then, of course, you were talking to a room with like 8 people and a bunch of empty coats, and so yeah, it didn't really vote, but it is still out there and it's still finding its way into people's hands, and it was a lot of fun. Just about everything I really thought I wanted to do in working in film. But of course, because of the expense and complexity of getting even the simplest film project off the ground, comics are infinitely easier. Then you just have to browbeat one guy into doing everything but write the script. So totally easier, a lot easier.
And for folks interested in checking out Mystery Meat, why should they? What does Mystery Meat offer them?
Well, it's about what we wanted to do was, I mean, we loved the old EC and Warren horror comics, but our what had a real pride of catbird seat in our hearts was the underground horror comics of the 70s. Sort of kitschy, campy, grindhousey kind of mentality of the horror comics to advance real social issues. There were comics like Skull and Slow Death Eco Funnies put out by like Last Gasp, and they were amazing. And they were, because while Warren Comics were still doing, there's a vampire out there, out in the village, but the werewolf. But don't worry, because the doctor's a ghoul. Just trading on these really horror universal monster concepts and old European folklore and stuff that was dead. The underground horror comics were saying, no, there really is a horrible world, and you're by bit in grocery stores and stuff. And so it was presenting the modern world, the kind of thing conditioned to want and to desire and to work our entire lives for, as being the real horror. And you look at horror comics and horror films, and so often what's supposed to be horror was supposed to be really scary. I mean, scary in the sense of jump scares and sometimes possible actual, gore and repulsion, but it's never scary in any way that stays in your mind. It for the most mass media produces in the way of horror, it's essentially comfort food, libertarian survival fantasies, and nostalgic trips through better stuff that we all grew up with, and should actually get you where you live, should actually look at the thing you'd rather not examine, not the thing that our ancestors didn't want to examine 200 years ago. And it seemed like there was this huge furor and a huge blind spot, a lot of denial just about food. And looking at things like Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser, and the film that was made of it, and a lot of vegan agitprop and things like that speculated that factory farming's killing the planet, things, and holding out artificial meat as a magic bullet that could conceivably fix everything. It could create a cruel things, and it seemed wonderful. But if it's in the hands of the same people who have been blithely killing millions of animals on every site every day for decades without ever having a moment of pause to consider the ethics of it, then how would it necessarily be an improvement? There's an ancient Chinese proverb that if the wrong man uses the right means, then the right means will work in the wrong way. And so this idea being that if the same company that packages meat and has a company town where everybody that lives within the town is either an illegal alien or a felon, or they're currently in prison, and so they decide to start test marketing this meat, and they discover some amazing things about the links between this flesh that has the potential to taste like and take on the genetic properties of anything, and desire, and it starts to unleash people's individual desires, and it starts to become something. It takes on that glamour that we attach to a brand that rises above what it actually is. And for instance, there's a story in it about a woman who works in a diner that's serving new meat, and she's childless and conceives of the idea of making a child out of raw unprocessed new meat. It's called One Piece at a Time after the giant. But really, its influence is more in. It was more influenced by Little Odick, by Jan Svankmajer.
Oh, okay, yes.
Film up, yeah, you're familiar. And so yeah, the ugly, horrible, artificial baby.
Jan Svankmajer doing
out of control desires,
horrible things with body horror. The very idea.
right, and it's because it's taking the conclusion, and it's fun, but yeah, it does take a certain kind of, not just a certain kind of comics reader or even a certain kind of comics horror reader. When we were selling it at Comic-Con, we would notice that people could be attracted by Forbidden Futures if we just went, hey, do you like weird shit? But quite a lot of people would look at me, would have a very negative visceral reaction and yet be unable to look away. As I'm talking to them about this other stuff that we're doing, they'd look at it and they'd look away. Is that really? Yes, it is. God, that's awful. You've ruined my lunch. All right, I'm going to look inside it. And that's kind of of course, you can never get that person to pay for it, but that's kind of who we made it for. Because finding new ways, upsetting people, finding new ways of provoking people beyond the obvious, beyond just gore and is really endlessly fascinating to me, because we do have so many more blind spots than we regularly acknowledge, because we focus on the things that we think we try to ignore the things that we can't. So yeah. Well, this is what you're eating.
Yes. Well, we could all do to pay better attention to that, especially with all the various recalls that we're now subject to since the regulatory state is pulled back.
Sure. Oh, sure.
Now, speaking of new ways to provoke people, what can the folks here look forward to that's either just come out or is coming out in the future?
Well, in a mere 3 days, my next novel, Sleazeland, is coming out. Which, if you like slimy Hollywood K. Dick novels, you'll really enjoy. It's an amalgam of a lot of my experiences working as a background actor in Hollywood in 2016. And it's about a homeless, down and out, desperate background actor of an infamous celebrity cult that's based on a banned sketch parody of another infamous celebrity cult, and really secretive and really powerful. And as he's running from them, he falls through alternate versions of Hollywood, wherein, like, one where the fundamentalist Christians and made it so that any filmed entertainment that is not derived from the Bible or factual is bearing false witness. Thus, it's outlawed. And the guy who helped lead this revolution is now bemoaning the fact that their clubs are offering hot, live, pantsless spiritual instruction, and realizing that people will find what they'll just call it by different names. Yeah, it's a huge departure from what I did, what I'm known for, but I'm only known for that to about a half a dozen people. So I think my career can handle the left turn.
Fantastic.
I'm not real worried about losing 4 of those guys, because I can see them from my house. What's up?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Sorry we had a slightly contracted interview, but obviously we'll need to have you back on to discuss more cults, discuss more meats. If folks are interested in following what's going on with you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm always on Facebook. If you go to perilouspress.com, with an occasional micropress of modern cosmic horror, I do blog on there. And yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, editorial services on Fiverr and such like. And I have some music on SoundCloud. Okay, I guess I'm everywhere.
There we go. That's what I like to hear. Well, thank you for coming on. And for everyone else at home, if you're interested in the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society, join us on Facebook. We are a delightful conclave of attractive people. You get to be part of these live conversations. Thank you for everyone who's been in the comments, offering up a lot of different cults, just listing them like you do. If you're interested in finding my show, you can go to asklovecraft.com, where I impersonate H.P. Lovecraft 3 times a week. You can follow me screaming into the void on Twitter at Lehman Kessler. And you can also check out live shows. Like I said, that this show hopefully happening around Cleveland next spring. You can find more info about that at lehmankessler.com. Thank you all so much. Cody, thank you again. And I hope you all have a fantastic night. Bye,
Thank you, Lehman.
all. Bye, guys.
Yeah.